Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Audio Bar. As always, I'm your host, Mike Sains. Sitting next to me, my co-host and guitar player for the band Moogatu, Chris Lee. We're here in Centreville, Virginia, Blue Hippo Recordings. And with us today, we have a trio of musicians called Three Man Soul Machine from Washington, D.C. D.C. proper, from the D.C. scene, so I've heard. And I have a lot of questions about this band. And before I try to put any words in your mouth, how would you describe the sound of this band?
I would describe it as like a sort of a soul-oriented kind of quasi-jazz group. We do play jazz. We enjoy jazz, but we also enjoy soul jazz from the 60s. We like reggae. We like noise. We like extended improvisation. I think that it's very multifaceted, and we try to fit ourselves for the situation that we're in. Like if we were going to play a jam festival, we jam more. If we go to a suit and tie jazz club, we just play more jazz, things like that. But it would still have our like kind of our twinge on it, our tinge to it.
Frank likes to say it's a what do you call it? 21K, the 21K.
Second question: tell me, what is a 21K organ trio?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we are. We are the 21st century twist on the time-honored organ trio configuration. So what I view it as is that we have the old school tradition with some of the modern openness, and that's what we're trying to like. We're trying to put these all together in a yin and a yang, like kind of a musical Confucianism, as it were.
Wow! Before we get too ahead of ourselves with that, was good. From left to right, name an instrument for our listeners on the podcast and our viewers here on the show.
My name is Frank Mitchell Jr. I play tenor saxophone.
I'm Lee Durham, play drums.
Carter Stevens, I play organ.
Fantastic, and this is the Three Man Soul Machine trio. So let's jump into the history of the band. How did we get here right now? How did you guys come together?
I had always wanted to do this sort of thing, and I had a trio before. Lee played a couple gigs with us. I called it the Soul Dub Syndicate. It was me and Lee and Will Rast. And then
Frank and I met because of Funk Arc. I used to play drums in Funk Arc. Will Rast keyboards of Funk Arc. And Frank would sub sometimes on the gigs, and we had a rapport pretty quickly. From, you get to a gig, 6 hours early, and you got to talk to somebody. So Frank and I became fast friends, talking to each other. And
high impact friendship.
Right, yeah, exactly.
There's also a lot of begging. Please come play music with me.
Well, yeah, and then once he started trying to do something like that on his own musically, he was already doing a group called Frank Mitchell Jr., which was a recording project of sorts, but Funk Arc as a group backed him up a few times.
Played Electric Forest.
We played Electric Forest Festival
nice.
A couple of years back, and we played to Hamilton. And that was always fun, and I always knew that Frank had a sensibility to himself musically that was unique, and very rooted in soul and blues and jazz, obviously, from his saxophone playing, but just
specific,
as a person,
right, yeah.
Soulful. And so when he asked me if I wanted to do this one gig at Shea Billy, of course I wanted to say yes, and we did the gig, and that was all right.
It was, it's your typical DC story, when you're on stage, everything is great.
Right.
The problems will always happen before you hit the stage and after you leave the stage. But hey, it helped us come together, and then I found Carter through Craigslist. I just kept looking and looking and looking, and finally he was the only one that had sent some sound samples, and I was like, well, he sounds good. Let's get together and play. And then we went through a couple drummers, and then finally we had a gig at Petworth Day. The Petworth Jazz Nights at Petworth, like September 3 years ago?
Yeah, something like that.
And so I begged him to play, and he played, and then we just started charging after it ever since.
Yeah. You guys have been together for quite a while now, 3 years.
Yeah, and Frank and I had played a couple times with other drummers.
Yeah.
Who were good drummers, but when we got Lee, it kind of all really gelled, and that was, it just worked out a lot smoother.
And in that time, how much have you focused on live shows, studio recordings, even balance of both?
I think we've been more focused on live shows. I think the studio recording was a really, really happy accident. where we found a nice spot. It was affordable, and basically it was like, well, let's go over there and try to record, and then that's where the album came from. We were very fortunate. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised. I was like, well, let's just go over there and do it. Let's see what's going to happen. And then I started getting roughs, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, very good, cool. I was excited. I was like, yeah, okay, we're going to go back there again and again and again and again. That's what we're going back to.
So a friend of mine is an audio engineer, and it just so happens that his father-in-law is also an audio engineer, as well as a bass player. And he has just a little studio in his house, very, very small. It's just one room, you know, and he has a control room. And he gave us the friends and family rate. We came in there for 6 hours. My other friend, not the same guy, a different guy, who's also an audio engineer, he came in and engineered the session. And then we knocked out 11 tunes in the 6 hours.
In 6 hours?
Yeah.
Are these the sessions that went
Produced,
on to
yeah,
become
the whole
Full On
Upcoming
Home?
album,
Yeah, definitely.
And that's 5 originals and 5
Written by Lee.
written by me.
Yeah, I noticed
And-
quite a diverse song selection in here.
Yeah.
There's
Hey, you have a
Bob
Bowie
Marley
song
and
on there?
some
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coltrane. And
Yeah.
how did you guys come up with sort of the song selection in terms of what you were covering?
I have had all these crazy ideas in my head for years, and the thing is when I got the guys together, I would be like, hey, do you want to try this? Hey, let's play Impressions as a reggae tune. And, you know, this was the first group of people that didn't look at me like, wow, that is so stupid. Why do you
We're
want
like,
to do
yeah,
that?
let's try it. Let's see
You
what's
know?
up.
So
We do another one of Frank's ideas, somewhat. Rastaman Chant, which is a traditional song, but popularized by Bob Marley and the Wailers as kind of like a meters-ish.
yeah, it's like we
Yeah.
do it more of a funk tune, which is, so we like to take tunes and play around with different grooves on them.
What's it like taking reggae and incorporating jazz and soul into that? It's a different rhythm. You know, so what's it like incorporating those? Is it harder, or is it relatively easy for a musician? With
I
that much
think the
distance?
whole thing with me is that, because I spent a lot of years playing with CI, and what I had to tell myself on the CI gig was, I'm not going to sound like any of the traditional guys, like the sax players that play at Bukum or anything like that. I'm not going to sound like those guys. So what I'm going to have to do is get my own little take on it. So I listened to a lot of Tommy McCook, did a lot of stuff like that, and then kind of copped it and said, okay, now this is my kind of version of it. It may not be as good, but it's going to be semi-valid. You know what I mean? At least I'm making an effort to try to play in the tradition.
There's a precedent for it.
The
you
frame
know?
of reference that
Yeah.
you were going for. Yeah.
But, you know, like, people would mostly take jazz tunes and make them reggae, not really the other way around.
Sure.
So, but, you know, we thought, why not? Let's
And
give it a try.
As musicians for the two of you, how did it end up working out? I mean, in your personal experiences, what were the challenges for you as a drummer and organist? I mean,
Let Carter take that one.
I mean, I think it's always, with the organ, you're always trying to cover, especially when you're playing with a saxophonist instead of a guitarist, you're always kind of trying to cover the bass lines and the chords, and you're soloing the melody. So obviously, with any keyboard instrument, you've kind of got to do a lot of splitting of the brain.
Sure.
But I think, especially for the reggae stuff, because that can get real empty, So it's kind of a work in progress, but just trying to keep all the parts going and keep it full sounding. It's a lot less sort of. With jazz, you kind of have like a template that you're kind of like, you can just sort of fit this role. But with the reggae thing, it's like, okay, I've never heard anyone do this before, so I have to kind of try and figure it out for myself.
Interesting. And do you think of it as straight reggae, or?
No, I mean, I wouldn't tell like a reggae guy, we're like traditional reggae at all, But it's definitely just kind of like taking some of that flavor and groove, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of a tapestry.
Yeah.
So, how many years combined do you guys have honing all of these different sounds, being able to play in these different sandboxes and making them like one thing? Like,
Well, not to give away too much, but I'm
Frank's the old man.
I'm 50.
I'm sorry.
I'm 51 years old, and I've been playing professionally since I was about 14. So, and not playing well professionally, just playing professionally. And I think that I've always I always liked grooves. I always just wanted to play my horn. So it was like, oh, Latin band. Ooh, Balkan band. Ooh, reggae band. And so I would always get into these situations, and I'd be like, well, as long as I can solo, I'll figure out what I can do, and I'll get their thing together, because it was always a nice intellectual challenge for me. But now I'm kind of like, well, it's one thing to have ideas, but instead of bothering other people with them, which is what you do when it's not your band. Oh, we should do this, we should do this. And I was that guy, and people just hated me. And I was just like, well, I need to get my own group together, because I'm tired of chewing people's ears off and having them just go, God, could he just put the horn in his mouth and shut up?
Yeah, idea guys are the worst. So let's talk about this in the context of the DC scene a little bit. What is, when I say like the DC jazz scene, what does that mean to you three? Or the DC jazz and soul music?
It's good and it's bad and it's diverse and it's cliquish and it's got a lot of elements. The thing is, I used to sometimes like my dad had an opportunity to go to work in California in the 70s, and I was always all moaning about losing my California childhood, having to sit in god awful DC. But here's the thing: there's blues here, there's punk rock here, there's a DJ scene here, there's jazz here. You can still hear good gospel music here. You can hear a lot of things. So I could have grown up in, no offense to Reading, PA, but I wouldn't have heard as much music in Reading, PA. You know,
The Amish music is good.
you know, so that's the whole thing. But I'm kind of like, I think to me, there's a lot going on. The biggest fight we have right now is anybody that has square footage is under a lot of pressure to sell it as opposed to have a club. You know, because we can all sit here and go, oh man, oh, gentrification, oh, I'd never do that. Well, have somebody hand you a $10 million check. And then let's see what you would do. And I mean, I feel really bad about the Bohemian Caverns thing. I really wish it was still there. But I also kind of see the landlord's point of view. He's got prime real estate in a prime area and
On the corner,
and he wants to make some money. And how do you balance that? You know, I think that's our biggest problem. You know, getting venues. Like, maybe we should try to think more about pop-up venues, or streamline the grants process more so people could get weekly grants. Like, say you could get a $500 weekly grant to do a jazz pop-up.
to be a musician.
Yeah.
That's
Or to
really interesting.
Put on a show. Yeah.
So I was going to ask ways that you might see to improve the scene from a musician's standpoint. What's something that comes up a lot when you talk to each other or musicians in the scene? Like, what's something like, man, if we could just get this.
I think that scenes develop by everybody pushing their own thing. Because usually when someone says, God, I wish our scene was better, what they're saying is, I wish somebody would book my band. You know, and I mean, no offense. I mean, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but I got to the point where I was like, okay, the only way you're going to get booked is if you go out and get a gig. You got to go get yourself booked, and
It is a business.
you also have to be able to say no. You know, when someone calls you and says, I've got this great restaurant gig, it's going to pay $20 a man, that's when you hang up the phone. You hang up the phone and you just say, no, I mean, even if you're only willing to take 30, you still have to hold out for 30. You know, because, and that's our problem. We're so desperate to play sometimes that we're at the mercy of people with venues, you know. And we work for a guy that is great. I mean, our steady Saturday night is awesome. We make pretty good bread. There's no cover charge. We've got great crowds. They're multiracial, multi-generational. And it's, to me, that's DC diversity, new school and old school. I really like that.
So what are some names right now, if you could describe the DC scene that are popping up? Like, please, for our listeners, people, bands, things to check out. Obviously, 3 Man Soul Machine, but part of the DC scene would include bands such as?
Black Masala. I used to play with them. Still a very good band. I would check out, when he's in town, he's moved to New York, but I'd check out Elijah Balbed. Sorry, Elijah, if I said your last name wrong. Crystal Youth. There's another band, I used to play with B-Side Shuffle, Jeff Browning's band, Of Tomorrow. I think they do some pretty interesting stuff, some of the hardest horn arrangements known to man. But that's a practicing problem on my part. I think that the Jazz and Cultural Society is a nice venue. I think people need to get out and support that.
Yeah,
I've seen 4 or 5 shows there.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it. I haven't heard anything about
Yeah,
this.
I've never heard of it.
It's over in Northeast, over in Brookland, and
By the Home
basically,
Depot over there.
yeah, for like $5, You go in and you can buy some chips or something. They don't serve alcohol, I don't think.
I think
right?
it's just like soda, but it's just
Yeah.
like a real. It's not like going to a jazz club. Like if I had to like put on a suit and like shell out a bunch of money, you just feel like you're in like someone's living room almost. Just kind of like, and everyone's real friendly. It's just like sort of a real like family atmosphere almost. You know, just real like real welcoming and like let's just hang out and listen to some of the best jazz musicians in the city. Or I think occasionally they even get people from New York to come down. So it's a really cool experience.
It's diverse too. They have vocalists and they have
Yeah.
piano trios and then different groups that come in.
Yeah, it definitely keeps it real old school and bluesy. No one's trying to play in 17/8 or whatever, which I like. So.
You mentioned something just now. People maybe sometimes getting people to come down from New York. How do you think the rest of the scenes in this country would see the DC music scene? How do you think you're perceived from the outside? Like, you guys know what it's like on the ground level every day. You're in it. But, like, have you heard, like, are there ways people describe this scene because of its flaws or if it's specific? Like, if you come to DC, do you come here for a certain sound or a certain reason or bands?
I think it's like anything else. I think that what happens is we're a different city. People have a perspective on us that it's all government. It's government. It's monuments. It's this. And then once you break through the surface, it's actually one of the hippest cities on the East Coast. I mean, there's a lot to complain about. I mean, we're hindered by the fact that we have a budgetary chain called Congress that doesn't let us keep our own tax dollars and kind of just gives us what they feel like giving us. But I think that there's good sounds here. I think there's good players here. A lot of players use the city as a jump-off point to go to New York. I've thought about it, but on the other hand, there's nothing. I love New York, but after about 2 weeks, I want to come home. So I haven't really found anything up there that makes me want to move up there.
What's the quality that keeps you here?
God, this is going to sound bad. I like the problems I have. I don't really have to go and get new
Trust the devil
problems.
you know.
So, and I've got the city wired. People know me here. Like, if I really, really, really need, like, if I've got to get a haircut and go get a wedding gig, I can do that. You know, I don't know if I could do that in New York.
Sure.
Could you compare it between here and New York? Because I've played gigs in New York, and it's way different. There's so much going on every night. There's so much competition. Absolutely. I'd say it's a little more cutthroat up there than.
Well, it's so cutthroat that when people from New York come down here to play a gig, they're instantly trying to hand you their card.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, I don't need saxophone player cards. You know, no offense.
No offense or anything.
But I think I can. If I can't handle the gig, I just won't take it. Okay,
Yeah.
but I think I'm good. I don't need any saxophone cards.
So, how do you think the reception's been for this album so far? Because we're 2 weeks into the release?
Yeah, I think we're
A little over a month.
A little over a month, yeah. I think people like it. I think that we played this show with the Kansas Bible Company over at Gypsy Sally's. And, they had a lot of their fans there. And, I think people's initial reaction to us is kind of, and then it's like, oh. So I think once you give it a chance, we kind of bring you in. I think that's kind of what's going on. I mean, that's the reaction I felt from the Kansas Bible Company crowd. Because they were kind of like, what?
They try to get a read on you.
Yeah, and then they were like,
so much.
oh, okay, that's what they're doing. Okay. And I know that when I announce, what I try to do is I try to tell people kind of what we're doing and get them on our team and let them feel like they're part of the experience.
If you haven't noticed, Frank talks a lot in between the songs, which is a great part of the live set.
That's a good thing.
It's a crucial element, I think.
It's unique, I'd say.
It's in a way, if you compare it to, like, say, a late night show, before the host comes out, they have a comedian warm up the crowd for several minutes just to get them used to the idea that there's about to be somebody standing right here this whole time talking to you guys, and you need to behave and probably show a little support.
Yeah, definitely.
So you're also a bit of a manager then, from that perspective. You're sort of the coach.
Kind of a coach / ringmaster. Essentially, I try to have, like, even I try to lead, but I also try not to be too ham-fisted about it. Like I'll say, hey, do you guys want to do this? And it's kind of like, no. And I'm like, okay, then what are we going to do now then? So I've tried to lead that way. I know that my problem is I'm a meticulous planner, which will surprise a lot of people about me because I don't really have the demeanor of someone who plans constantly, but I'm kind of like, oh man, if I just plan, everything will be okay. And it's like, I need to get over that because just because you plan doesn't mean it's going to be okay.
I can relate to that so hard. Yeah. Just because, quickest way to hear God laughs is to announce your plans. There's several ways to say that, but yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And it's always a process for any kind of creative thing, but I guess we're kind of covering all the bases.
Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of your plans for? I know you guys are mentioned earlier. You're focusing on live stuff. What's coming up for you guys this summer and this fall and beyond?
We've got our steady. We've got a few good gigs coming up, and
Which we should mention. The steady is
Yeah,
at
what's-
Band 1301 on U Street every Saturday from 9 to 12.
Yeah.
So y'all should
Is
definitely
it
come out.
1401?
1301.
1301.
1301.
it's the
Bin
wine bar right
1301.
by
Yeah.
it's the wine bar right by Salatai, and
Yeah.
BIN 1301. B in Spanish is V, so it's like the Bin 1301.
It's a weekly residency.
Yeah, every Saturday, and then every
We've been doing
third
it
Thursday.
since February, I want to say.
Yeah,
Or
it's
March or something.
So what's the summer looking like other than the regular gigs?
We're doing Boundary Stone. They started having music in like First Street Northwest, August 4th. I don't know if this will be live by then, but and then we're doing the Saycraft Brewery.
That's a cool spot.
Yeah, we haven't played there yet. The 12th,
Yeah,
I believe,
12th.
of August. So I mean, we kind of book month to month. Like it's
Yeah.
we don't have a lot of stuff like booked out,
Gotcha.
but the more that we play, the more we hopefully will sell some CDs. I mean, it's on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon. It's also on the Bandcamp page for the label growroom.bandcamp.com. And yeah, we're just trying to push the original music, our vision of this different sort of music, calling from lots of influences.
Plans to stay a trio for the unforeseeable
That's my
future.
next question.
I think we talk about that a lot. and
We
I
always
think-
talk about that. We shouldn't have named
No
the
damn
band
guitars.
Three Man Soul Machine.
I think the thing is eventually,
Very limited.
eventually, especially with the ideas I have and the access to the recording studio, I'd like to do a quartet group like this with a guitarist. I'd like to do a bigger band doing some Tommy McCook tunes. I have an idea of playing 5 or 6 Led Zeppelin tunes in the bossa nova groove.
Yeah, there's these ideas for like
Oh.
small EPs.
Yeah.
we're not gonna give them all away.
Yeah, like what? I mean, that's my idea, by the way. So don't. But no, so
That was a good idea.
my problem is that my brain just works constantly. But I think I'm finally in a situation where I can almost create at will. We just have to get bread together, and I've got to work on the other thing too. I'm almost have a promotion team in place. Just have to earn a little more money and get that all locked in. But
You gotta do.
I'm about ready to we're really on the verge of putting together a good behind the scenes team as well. So my goal would eventually be in the future that hopefully we could play festivals and tour and maybe block out 100 dates a year and then be able to budget, and then we can see if we're still going to stay in DC, or if we're all going to get that great cheap apartment we've all heard about in Baltimore, which I don't know if it's there. It could be like the Holy Grail, You get to the building and no, it's $1,600 a month, bro. Sorry.
And all the piping was taken out. I'm sorry, personal experiences. So you just mentioned there's a label behind this?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is a label that I started with some friends back, probably close to 10 years ago now. But it started more as like a production company called Grow Room Productions, and I had a lot of people, friends and musicians involved, and we would just put music together. We threw a bunch of parties and big events and stuff like that. bands called The Mighty Herd, we were back in the day, and Savage Badger Badges, like some other bands, you know.
That's a fantastic name.
Yeah, lots of a variety of different genres as well. So, but now I've been focusing more on releasing the music that we've been recording. You know, I'm gonna there's a bunch of like from the vault type things that I have, you know, that are gonna be released soon. But 3-Man Soul Machine is kind of like the flagship live, because most of the groups that I have don't really perform live. It's a lot of recorded stuff.
Interesting.
So we have the live thing and we have the physical product, and I have a couple other groups that I'm also involved in, put out on the Grow Room Productions label, growroom.bandcamp.com, and I just released a guy that I had nothing to do with, which was great. I played 0 instruments on this thing. I didn't record any of it. I didn't master any of it.
How'd
I
you
didn't
come
mix
upon
any
it?
of it. Is a friend of mine, and he had been toiling away on his songs, this collection of 6 songs, for almost 4 years. And I heard it, and I was like, dude, this has to be out there. So he gave me the permission to put it out, and he remixed it all. I did have my friend master it, another sound engineer friend of mine, and then I put some art together. He did a lot of the art as well. Like, I almost did nothing on this release, so that's great. So I'm working on another girl. I just recorded her stuff, and that'll be out soon. And I play with another group called the Harry Bells, and I'm releasing a remix album of our first EP in August. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Well, I think I'm just going to ask, do you have anything else? That was a whole bunch of plugs. But is there anything else?
I didn't. You just asked me a question. I don't know.
No, you did. You had no idea. I was about to wrap it up.
Well, I'd like to give, I'd just like to give the music scene in DC and in general a nice shout out. I'd like to give a shout out to the guys that used to be in the Paper House, the House and the band. I've had great experiences there with them. And, big shout out to CI and Thievery Corporation. I had some good years with those guys, and it's been great, but it's just time to do something else. So that's.
I think that about covers it.
I think that about covers it then. Thank you for listening to the interview. Stick around for the music because it's coming right up. See you soon.